Mr. Lee was certain there was no way Giovanni was his son. He wasn't even entertaining the possibility. Ms. Brewington, on the other hand, had no doubts. In her mind, this wasn't even a discussion. They had history. They already shared a child. They were living together, sleeping in the same bed, doing everything that led to a baby. And now, he wanted to act like it never happened? Like those nights didn't count? Oh, he was in for a rude awakening.
Ms. Brewington, you are here to prove your 3-year-old son Giovanni is Mr. Lee's biological child, and you claim Mr. Lee has been a father to your son since the day he was born and is denying paternity because he wants to avoid paying child support. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
But Mr. Lee wasn't budging. He had his story, and he was sticking to it. According to him, they were just cohabiting, nothing more. Yes, they lived in the same house, but he swore there was no intimacy, no late-night entanglements, nothing that could possibly lead to a baby.
And you say you know 100% you're not the biological father of Giovanni.
Yes, Your Honor, I do.
I want to know why you have doubt.
At the time that Gio was conceived, we were not having no type of intercourse. We were not cool at the moment.
You don't believe you were working on the relationship at the time Giovanni was conceived?
No, not at all.
When Ms. Brewington told him she was pregnant, he shut it down immediately. Impossible, he thought. Not mine. He didn't just doubt it, he flat out denied it. He even made her take 3 separate pregnancy tests, as if that would change the outcome. And yet, despite all that, he was so sure the baby wasn't his that he refused to acknowledge the pregnancy at all.
Take me back to the day you found out you were pregnant.
Okay, I found out that I was pregnant. I actually went to the doctor to just re-up on my birth control. They said, oh, you actually missed your last shot. I didn't even realize it. They said that they had to do a pregnancy test before they could go ahead with the birth control. So I went ahead, they did a pregnancy test. It came up positive.
Ms. Brewington remembered how he dismissed her growing belly, scoffed at her ultrasounds, and told people not to believe her. To him, she was just getting fat. Even when she went into labor, he still tried to deny it. But the moment Giovanni was born, something changed. The second he found out it was a boy, suddenly, he cared.
Throughout this pregnancy, as you prepared for the birth of Giovanni, was Mr. Lee present?
No, he was telling people I was just getting fat. He was like, she just eats a lot of fast food. Everybody was rubbing, my friends were rubbing my stomach. I'm showing ultrasounds to people. He's like, don't believe her, she's just fat. The entire time. I'm talking about, I'm going into labor. He's like, no, you're not.
Not only did he sign the birth certificate, but he insisted on naming the child himself, a complete 180th. So what was it? Guilt? A change of heart? A secret suspicion that maybe, just maybe, the baby was his after all? But now, standing in court, he had reverted right back to denial. The baby wasn't his. He only signed that birth certificate because it felt like the right thing to do at the time. Besides, they already had one child together. What was one more?
You signed the birth certificate, right?
Yes, I did.
If you had all this denial and you say she eating fast food and this isn't even a pregnancy, but then you get there and execute a birth certificate?
It was the right thing at that moment. We already had a previous child, like I said, so...
You just go around signing birth certificates.
What made the situation even more complicated was that Brewington had been absolutely certain from the start that Lee was the father. She even offered a DNA test in the hospital. But despite her certainty, Lee kept denying it, his excuses growing more absurd as the case went on.
And then, Ms. Brewington, it doesn't really make sense to me is why are you offering him a DNA test if you are 100% sure?
That was because I was 100% sure. If he has any doubt, you know, I carried the baby, I birthed the baby. If you have any doubts, go ahead. I don't mind making you look stupid. That's why I'm here now.
The courtroom was filled with laughter and disbelief as both sides continued their verbal sparring, each denying the other's version of events. The tension was clear. How could a woman be so sure about the father if she had no concrete proof? How could a man deny a child he'd been so closely involved with?
I had another reason I did not think that it was mine is one of her friends, a good friend of her, actually told me that I wasn't the father.
Really?
She told me that she knows
My friend
who's the father.
told him that because she wanted to sleep with him.
I'm still talking.
I actually caught them sleeping together.
What?
Ms. Brewington argued till she was exasperated. To her, this whole thing was ridiculous. They were together. They had been intimate. How could he possibly think this wasn't his child? Well, that's because she told him so. She has zero doubts.
Thought, it was a chance because I bought home DNA tests as well. He told me he didn't trust me to swab his mouth.
No.
He didn't trust me to put the correct DNA into the box.
No, it's a home test. Who does that? And she told me herself I wasn't the father, so...
I told him that in anger, Your Honor.
Multiple times.
Judge Lake had heard enough. She wasn't one to let inconsistencies slide. One minute, he refused to acknowledge the pregnancy, but then he rushed to the hospital and signed the birth certificate. Which was it? And then the results were in.
Mr. Lee, you are not the father.
Told y'all.
Hold up.
I already knew it. I told you.
Don't look at me like that. I don't know God's plan.
Who else?
Jermaine Benning had been here before, on Couples Court, where the truth about his partner's infidelity had come out, but nothing had prepared him for this. The nagging doubts, the whispers in the back of his mind, and the text messages that had nearly broken him, now he was here to face them, head on.
Mr. Benning, you recently appeared in Couples Court and it was confirmed that the defendant cheated on you. This infidelity has caused questions regarding your 2-year-old daughter, Robin, and 6-month-old son, Jermaine Jr.'s paternity. Although you are hopeful that both are your children, you now have doubts. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Kayla Bodine, sitting across from him, wasn't having it. She was certain. No hesitation, no second guessing. As far as she was concerned, this entire thing was unnecessary. And she has evidence to back her case up.
Ms. Bodine, you claim you are certain the plaintiff is Robin and Jermaine Jr.'s father and have evidence to support your claim. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
For years, Mr. Benning believed Robin was his flesh and blood, a promise fulfilled after the painful loss of his mother when he was just 14. His bond with her has been a lifeline, deep, emotional, and unbreakable. He's been her rock, her daddy.
Mr. Benning, tell me about your relationship with your daughter, Robin, and how these paternity doubts are affecting you.
Well, first off, Your Honor, my mother passed away when I was 14 years old. She was my best friend. We spent every waking moment together. And after she died, it, left me hurt. I always wanted a daughter, and I promised I was going to take care of her.
But everything changed when Ms. Bodine, his partner, admitted to infidelity, a truth that now casts a shadow over both children. The man who once thought he had it all now stands before the court, consumed by the most gut-wrenching doubt. But Ms. Bodine insists that despite the cheating, Mr. Benning is the father.
You were pregnant at that time. Did you know there could be any other possibility?
No, Your Honor. I admit I did cheat, but for certain he's the father. We was together while I got pregnant with Robin, and I know for certain he's the father.
And then there was the moment he could never forget. The hospital room, the chaos of childbirth, the excitement of meeting his daughter for the first time. And right there, in the middle of it all, a message popped up on his phone. Cold, unapologetic.
It happened during labor, Your Honor. I was in the hospital sitting across from Kayla as she was pushing this baby out. And I received a text from a guy telling me to leave the hospital because that's his baby and he needs to be there.
What?
I am in labor, like literally in the hospital. And I received a text telling me that the child that I'm waiting to come isn't mine.
His world had tilted that day, but he shoved the doubt down and buried it deep. He had signed the birth certificate anyway. He had told himself that love was stronger than any rumor, that fatherhood was more than blood. But now he wasn't so sure. Ms. Bodine says she has ruled the other guy out, but it wasn't just one guy, was it?
How do you know this other guy is not the biological father?
Because, Your Honor, I stood up and did the woman and the mother thing I had to do and got the other guy tested.
So you had a DNA test on the other guy already?
Yes, and he wasn't the father.
And you submitted those results to the court?
Yes, I did, Your
All
Honor.
right.
From the first minute, Mr. Benning had been on the brink of tears. This is clearly very emotional for him. 2-year-old Robin, 6-month-old Jermaine Jr., the loves of his life, the children he had poured his heart into. He had been there for every diaper change and every late-night cry. But Ms. Bodine was also there telling him he is not their father.
As well as, Your Honor, anytime that something is wrong, I'm also reminded, oh, you're not her father. As soon as we start to argue, you're not her father. But if you need something, I'm
You
the
say
father.
stuff to hurt my feelings. Why can't
Have I
I do
ever
it
told
to
you that you're not the parent of your kid?
You can't. I pushed him out.
Ms. Bodine claimed she said those things to hurt his feelings. But it wasn't just about Robin. She had sent him messages after every little quarrel telling him that he is not Jermaine JNR's father. He had played them off, but now he needs to be sure.
You are just 100% certain.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Bodine says she is 100% certain. That doesn't make your doubt subside?
I don't trust the thing that really comes out of her mouth. I really don't. And to be honest with you, after all this has happened, depending on the doubts with Robin, I wouldn't know about my son as well.
But then, the moment of truth. The results for the 2 children are in. The tension in the room was unbearable. Mr. Benning was visibly shaking. Judge Lake could feel the weight of what she was about to say.
Mr. Benning, you are not the father.
What the?
For over 40 years, Mr. Fegan had carried a secret, a burden he could no longer keep. He believed, no, he knew, that Ms. Pinkston was his daughter, and today he was here to prove it.
Mr. Fagan, you're here to prove that Miss Pinkston is your biological daughter.
Yes, Your Honor.
You claim you kept this secret for 40 years, but now say the DNA will prove your case.
That's right, Your Honor.
But Ms. Pinkston, she doesn't share that belief. She stood firm, unwavering in her belief that the man who had raised her, the man she had called Dad for decades, was her real father. This stranger before her, a man she barely knew, no chance. And yet he sat there, insisting, pleading, confident that the DNA would confirm what her mother had told him all those years ago.
Miss Pinkston, you stand before me without any doubt that Mr. Fagan is not your biological father, and the man who raised you is.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Miss Pinkston, what upsets you most about Mr. Fagan's claim that you are his biological daughter?
Well, Your Honor, I met Mr. Fagan here when I was 16 years old. I never knew of him.
How did it come to this? A hidden affair, a whispered confession, and a tangled web of secrets. Mr. Fagan and Ms. Pinkston's mother had been co-workers, and well, one thing led to another. You know how it is. For months, they shared stolen moments, quiet rendezvous, and then the bombshell. She was pregnant, but instead of honesty, there was a pact. The secret would stay buried. After all, she was married. And her husband? He would raise the child as his own, never knowing the truth.
Why you believe Miss Pinkston is your biological daughter?
Me and Miss Pinkston's mother had an affair. We worked together at a plant. We got to know each other.
You spent a lot of time together.
A lot of
'cause you
time
worked
together.
a lot of hours together.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Your Honor.
Did you know she was married?
Well, yes, at the time, it was wrong. But
Ms. Pinkston grew up in a loving home, never questioning her parentage. Her father was her rock, her protector. Then, at 16, everything shattered. A casual visit to her mother's friend's house turned into a nightmare. And why? Because they thought she was dating a family member. That was the only reason they even told her.
The only reason why this all came out, for the cat to get out the bag, is when I was 16, they told me that Kenny was my father. The only reason why was because my mom thought I was dating one of his family members, and that's why they told me. But needless to say, it was not me, it's my sister that was dating his family member.
Oh.
The weight of that revelation crushed her. She refused to accept the man she loved, the man who raised her, was her father. No DNA test could change that. When he passed away years later, he left this world, never knowing the secret that had been forced on her. And now, standing here in court, she was still protecting it, protecting him.
Not want to believe it, or you just...
I didn't believe it.
she, to this day, Your Honor, she does not believe that. That's why I am here.
Did you ever talk to your father, the man you believe
No,
your father?
my dad passed away never knowing the secret. From the time I was 16 until I was 27, we never spoke of this subject, ever.
Mr. Fagan, though, he had waited long enough. He watched from the shadows, always hoping for acknowledgement, yearning for the moment she would call him Dad. But it never came. Instead, he was just a visitor, a family friend, quietly watching his daughter grow up from a distance. And now, after decades of silence, he wanted the truth, needed the truth.
I never called my father because my father died. So it never felt right to call some other man dad when my dad passed away.
And I understood that, Your Honor. I did. It hurt me that she couldn't. And for all these years, I believed.
Your Honor,
I always thought he had some kind of inkling that I was.
For Ms. Pinkston, that was a terrible load to bear as a teenager, and the guilt of looking the man he called Dad in the eye, knowing what she knew continuously weighed her down.
from 16 to 27, never telling Mr. Pinkston that Mr. Fagan's supposed to be my dad. My dad died not knowing none of this.
Do you regret not telling him?
I do. I felt like if they had enough oomph to tell me about it, how come they didn't just let everything out the bag? And
For Mr. Fagan, the feeling was the same. Ms. Pinkston is her only surviving child. He couldn't bear to not be with his supposed daughter and just watch from afar. So after Ms. Pinkston's dad died, he told her children that he was their grandfather, creating instant chaos. To verify Pinkston's claims, the court called her sister to testify.
If you can hold it for 43 years, you should have just left it alone. Now there's family that didn't know. It just hurts.
Did you ever overhear anything?
Yeah, as a young kid, when grown up doing grown up things, and if they're with their friends, and sometimes people just talk and they think kids are back in the background.
Judge Lake took it all in. The emotions, the tension, the heartbreak in Ms. Pinkston's eyes. She understood, but this wasn't about feelings. It was about facts, and the DNA held the answer.
Mr. Fagan, you are not her
oh my
father.
God.
Oh, Lord, no.
Mr. Holmes wasn't buying any of it. He had no doubts. No way this grown woman standing before him was his daughter. He had been dragged into this courtroom over a claim he never asked for, a responsibility he never acknowledged. But Ms. Alston, she was certain.
Ms. Alston, you've come to court to prove to the defendant, Mr. Holmes, whom you first met at the age of 15, that you are his biological daughter.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Holmes, you say there's no way she's your child, and today the DNA will prove your case. You say her biological father is David Alston, the man who is on her birth certificate and paid child support for her.
She had grown up believing another man was her father, a man whose name was on her birth certificate, a man who had paid child support for her. But one conversation had upended everything. Her mother had pointed to Mr. Holmes and said the words that changed everything. And ever since that moment, she had held on to that truth despite his doubts, despite his distance.
How you first found out the defendant might be your father?
Well, Mr. Alston and my mom were married, so as a child, it all started there. I grew up in a home with my mom with my 7 siblings. So one summer I was going outside to play, and my mom was outside talking to a guy, and when I walked up, he was like, tell her. And she looked at me and said, this is your uncle.
Her voice was steady, but there was pain behind it. She had spent her whole life craving the love of a father, only to be rejected by the man she thought was hers. And now, she stood in court, fighting for recognition from a man who never even knew she existed. Mr. Holmes didn't hesitate. He had no emotional connection to this claim, no reason to believe it.
You don't believe she's your biological child?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
Why? Explain to the court.
Because Miss Alston's mother, back in the day, she was like fast. And because I met her at the school bus stop. She was in high school. And 2 days later, after I met her, I had sex with her. I called her again.
And yet, his own mother, Ms. Jenny, had always believed otherwise. She had accepted Ms. Alston as her granddaughter from the moment her mother had introduced them. No hesitation, no doubt. But why was he the last to know? That was the part that didn't sit right with him.
Her mother came to me first and said that Donna was my son's child. So I told John, I said, John, Donna is my grandchild.
And when her mother told you this, did she say or mention that there could also be other possible fathers?
No, she never admitted that to me. She just told me my son was Donna's father.
Also, Ms. Alston's mother had never given a clear explanation. Why had she lied for so many years? What was the point of this complicated web of half-truths and revelations? Ms. Alston had been left in the dark, forced to accept the love of a man who might not even be her father, all because her mother had told her what she wanted to hear. No answers, no closure.
Do you have any inkling as to why your mother said one man was your father, then another man? Did she ever give you a reason?
She never did. She's never.
Did you ever ask her?
No, I never asked.
So you just
when she told me and I met Miss Jenny, when they took me in as a family, I just ran with it because she said he was my dad.
It was finally time to hear from Mr. Alston, who was the man on her birth certificate, the man she had called a dad until her mom introduced Mr. Holmes. Let's see if he has any explanation for not creating a relationship with her.
You're saying that up until recently, you still considered her your daughter?
Yes, that's my daughter. There's no way in the world I would not think that.
Excuse me, Your
Honor.
He calls me his daughter sitting here, but he's never been a dad to me. He's never been a dad. I don't recall no phone calls.
But she says she tried to have a relationship with you and you rejected her.
No,
yes.
Ms. Alston had heard it all before. She had fought this battle long before stepping into this courtroom. She had tried to build a bond with Mr. Alston over the years, but was rejected. Now Mr. Alston says she is disrespectful and only saw him as a bank.
Money is minor. Where's the love? Where's the care? Where's the time? Where's the Christmases? That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. We're not here about money.
We're talking about 15 years, though.
We're talking about actually 16 years.
After 16 years, you said you had another father after
who's
16
been
years.
more of a father to me than you have, and you signed the birth certificate.
Why didn't you come to me?
Ms. Alston contended that she needed more than the money. She needed him, his presence, his love. Mr. Holmes pointed out that he had offered for her to stay with him, but she and her mom rejected his offer. Still, man, this is your daughter.
So this is the man on your birth certificate. This is the man you were led to believe for 15 years was your biological father, and yet you have no relationship with him.
Yeah.
This is the man at 15 your mother told you really is your biological father, and yet he doubts that you're his biological child, but his family accepts you as their family.
Yes.
But now, with the truth about to be revealed, she couldn't ignore the uncertainty that gnawed at her. What if he really wasn't her father? There was no turning back now. Will hearts be broken, or will connections be made? Ms. Alston tensed up.
Mr. Holmes, you are not Miss Alston's father. Mr. Alston, you are not Miss Alston's father.
Why'd she do that?
Lord have mercy.
It was messy from the start. Teenagers tangled in love, betrayal, and now a baby at the center of it all. Desire Shands sat in court, determined to prove one thing, that Amir Hollis, her first love, the boy she gave everything to, was the father of her 15-month-old son, Aiden. She wanted a family. He wanted nothing to do with her.
Miss Shands, you appear in court today because you are devastated that your first love and the person you lost your virginity to is now denying your 15-month-old son, Aiden. You say once you prove to the defendant that he is the father, you hope you two can finally be a family. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Amir, sitting beside his mother, wasn't buying any of it. In his mind, Desire was a liar, a cheat, and everyone, including his mother, knew exactly who the birth father was. Not him. Never him.
Is that Amir is the father of my child. He has been in my baby life ever since my baby has been 3 months. He's my first love, my first kiss, my first everything. And today I just want to know the truth about, I want to prove to him that he is the father of my child.
Judge Lake wasn't here for the back and forth drama. She had seen cases like this before. Young love gone wrong, reckless choices, and a child caught in the storm. But this one had layers. And as far as his mother was concerned, Desire had played herself.
This is really what went on. All of them would be at my house every weekend. His friend, that's the other guy that she messed around with, and they would be there all the time. And I was there one weekend, I was off. And she was going to the store. She said, come on, best friend. But that's supposed to be his best friend. Come on, best friend, let's go to the store. I told him, what I do that at?
Revenge. That's what Desire called it. Amir cheated, so she did the same. But not just with anyone, with his close friend. And not just once. Multiple times, no protection, no second thoughts, just messy, heated, emotional choices with life-altering consequences.
It sounds about silly. So you have revenge sex with one of his friends. And did you use protection?
No.
And then how many times did you have sex with this friend of his?
Multiple times.
Multiple times. But were you also still being intimate with Mr. Hollis?
Well, we had
broke up. When me and his friend had an affair, we wasn't together. We was not together at all.
An affair.
5 whole months of not knowing she was carrying a baby while bouncing between 2 young men. And who did she tell first? Not Amir, his friend. The same friend who had been with her when the baby was born. The same friend who had been ready to step up.
So you find out you're 5 months pregnant. What happens? Who do you tell?
Well, first I told his friend, because that's the person I was going with at the time. We ended up going out.
So the friend you cheated on him with, and the next thing you know, y'all end up
Excuse me,
yes, we end up
what she
going
saying
out.
don't matter. When she was going with my friend, she was still sneaking around with me anyway because
The other guy was at the hospital and signed everything. But then something changed. Desire took one look at Aiden and decided he looked more like Amir than anyone else. That's when the tables turned.
So, Miss Shands, if the other guy was at the birth, why are you now saying Mr. Hollis is the baby's father?
Because, like, my baby had more futures than him than the other guy.
Yes, he did.
He did not look nothing like the other guy at all.
I FaceTimed her and told her that it looked like I said, Aiden looks like Amir.
To make matters worse, Desiree wasn't exactly transparent about who the father could be. She had kept the other man's identity hidden from him, but it wasn't enough to convince Amir to change his mind. Not when his best friend was still walking around claiming the child as his own.
So to this day, the other person doesn't know that Mr. Hollis could be Aiden's biological father?
He hears it off the streets, because everybody on the street tell him that the baby looked like Aiden, the baby looked like Amir, the baby looked like Amir.
He think he his child.
But in his mind, he's running around the streets saying, this is my baby.
They're beefing over it. That him and my son is beefing over it.
Oh, but the case got worse. Apparently, the former high school sweethearts had been trading dropping videos and songs about each other in proper Gen Z style.
Can't be cuffing Columbus hoe. About a year ago, I was in love with a thought. It just keeps getting worse.
Oh, Miss Yana. And it was a video that went viral. It went viral. He made a little song. It got me and his picture in the background.
Indeed, and there's one way to cure this insanity. Desire was sure. Amir was in denial. His mother, she had already made up her mind. And then Judge Lake opened the envelope.
Mr. Hollis, you are not the father.
Meet the Virgin Mary. This was a mess. A hot, tangled, drama-filled mess. Mr. Harrington was in court absolutely convinced he was not the father of Nalani Day. He wanted nothing to do with the accusations, the whispers, or the drama. In his mind, this was an open and shut case. There were other contenders, and he had no doubt Ms. Day was trying to pin a baby on him simply because he was a responsible father to their other child.
Mr. Harrington, you claim you are not the father of Ms. Day's 1-month-old daughter, Nalani Day, and want her to stop pinning her baby on you. You say your sexual relationship with the defendant ended before she got pregnant. Ms. Day, you say you would never attempt to pin a baby on a man without being sure he is the father.
According to him, his relationship with Ms. Day had ended long before the pregnancy, and he wasn't buying her story. His claims were harsh. He called her promiscuous and hinted at other contenders for the father role, dismissing the possibility that he was the one. A baby tied to a week of reckless behavior, he said, was certainly not his responsibility.
Nalani is not my child. This is the reason though. Because there's other contenders, and she's a promiscuous person. She like to be, you know what I'm saying, she a party person. So she do whatever she feel like she want to do. And she knows I'm a good father to the child I already got with her. You know, I'm a good person, and I take care of my responsibility.
But Ms. Day wasn't having it. Her confidence was through the roof. According to her, if Mr. Harrington wasn't the father, then she must be the Virgin Mary. There was no other man, no other possibility, no question in her mind at all.
What do you do?
He is not the father of my child. I am the Virgin Mary. There's no other possibilities. I have not been messing around with anybody else throughout the time that we were messing around.
So you are 100% positive Mr. Harrington is your child's biological father?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge Lake wanted to understand the timeline. According to Ms. Day, she and Mr. Harrington were still intimately involved during the window of conception. In fact, things got so complicated that one of their encounters allegedly took place in a hospital while their other child was sick. Messy? Absolutely. But according to her, that's when the baby was conceived.
We were living together in September. So we got into it, broke up. My middle child, the other child that we have together, was having seizures. So she was in and out of the hospital. When we was in the hospital, at the hospital, we did it. So when we did it, I really do believe that's the day that I
At the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Harrington rolled his eyes. He wasn't buying it. He claimed she never even told him she was pregnant. He had to find out from an anonymous text message. The message suggested that not only was she pregnant, but there was another man in the mix.
She didn't even tell me that she was pregnant. I had to find out through an anonymous texter that.
How did you find out she was pregnant?
An anonymous texter, I swear. We got into a conversation, I got the text right here.
Let me see those,
Let me
please,
see
Jerome.
the text.
Look.
Let me see.
You about to see?
Make it up.
I swear to God, why would I make that up? Like,
I don't
come on
know.
now.
Mr. Harrington was blindsided. His sister had apparently known the whole time, and when he confronted her, the story got even shadier. It seemed like everyone knew about this baby before he did.
How you found out she was pregnant,
Yes,
though?
that's exactly.
Never mind guy number 1 and guy number 2.
Yeah, that's how I found out. Then I asked my sister, I called her, whatever. I was like, so I heard you was hiding the pregnancy. She was like, Kayla didn't want me to tell you, and she was also saying that you the daddy. And I'm like, how? When she ain't talking to me.
Ms. Day, however, stuck to her story, denying any other men could have been involved in the pregnancy. According to her, she had been with Mr. Harrington during the window of conception, and no one else could possibly be the father.
The tip was true that you were pregnant, but you're saying there was no guy number 1 and guy number 2.
No, it wasn't. There
is
a guy number 1 and a guy number 2, but not a guy number 1 and a guy number 2 potentially to be my child's father.
The drama escalated when the judge questioned whether Mr. Harrington had been supportive during the pregnancy. He admitted he had been present at the birth, but he made it clear that his presence was more about ensuring he wasn't missing out on the potential fatherhood. He hadn't even signed the birth certificate, and he only showed up to make sure everyone knew he was still keeping it real. He did suggest that if the baby was indeed his, she should take his last name, but only if.
And I want to understand, once he finds out you're pregnant, are you supportive of this pregnancy, Mr. Harrington? Are you at the doctor's appointments? Do you come for the birth?
Yes, I was there for the birth because I was saying to myself, okay, if I am a possible father, I don't want to have missed the birth. So I was keeping it real with myself. I was being real with myself.
Okay. All right.
Judge Lake wasn't one to tolerate nonsense, and she made it clear. Enough of the back and forth. It was time to get to the truth. The courtroom fell silent as she opened the envelope.
Mr. Harrington, you are not the father.
What? Told you, bro.
Are you serious?